So, Rich, have you heard about this new found footage movie with animals?
No.
It's actually combining grizzlies and the supernatural,
Oh, that's cool. What's it called?
the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, dear God.
Ooh, ooh, something about Goldilocks. Hello and welcome to MonsterKid Fury. I'm the host and producer, Callie. Joining me is Rich from MonsterKid Central. Hi, Rich.
Howdy. How are you?
Doing fantastic. And Rick from Film Fury. Hi, baby.
Hello.
And earlier today, we had technical difficulties. And what better thing to do with our time than freestyle? We'll catch back up with Mr. Mark Scheffler in the near future. So, take it away, guys.
So, Rich, there is something I wanted to talk to you about and see if you've heard of it. And this is not a joke like our lead in. Did you hear about the new news on Dexter over at Showtime?
Yes. I heard just a little bit about it. But please fill me in.
So, apparently, I wasn't the only one to think that it's odd to do a prequel to the TV series. And I kept wondering how they were going to suck people in with that idea. Well, apparently, Michael Hall is also going to do the voice in his head. So it's going to be young Dexter, but his thoughts will all be through Hall and his dialogue.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the way to pull people in because
Yes.
I had limited interest in the idea of a prequel TV series. And they announced all this was announced at San Diego Con. And the other big news is that there's going to be another series, Dexter Resurrection, and it's going to pick up after New Blood. So apparently,
really?
Dexter is not dead. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, can you really pull this off again? And Hall joke that if you look, you can see me still breathing a little bit, and it's very cold out there. So,
All right. Look, I hate to say it, but I mean, if he's in it, I'm at least curious because I've always been a fan of the show, and I like him. So
yeah, it screams volumes when you love an actor that much, and you're just like, all right, I'll watch. Why not?
yeah, because sometimes it's good. I mean, there's a possibility that that they're going to strike gold on this. I mean, you and I have kind of sort of mixed views on the 10th and 11th season of X-Files, but there were some gems in there. Even even people who weren't crazy about it, there are some gems in there.
Yeah. And
So
sometimes you're simply watching it for that actor, what they bring
absolutely,
to the role.
there's nothing wrong with that either, in my opinion.
Like Walking Dead, you and I have talked about that before, and,
Yep.
and, and I think we are going to do an episode on Walking Dead, so I can tap your head about
Well,
what kept you watching, because there was a certain point where unless I knew somehow Rick was going to be involved, I just didn't want to watch it. And kind of like Dexter, I'm like, well, I don't want to watch it if there's no connection to
right.
Hall at all. And now that he's in it, I'm kind of like, all right, now I guess I kind of have to watch and just see how it comes out.
Yep. Yeah, I would watch it again. I'm that sucker that they're looking for.
It's like there's this guy in Florida. Yeah, he actually dragged his wife to the locations of Dexter. He's the guy we want.
That's the one. That's what we're going with. The niche, our niche viewer.
So the other bit of news that came out of San Diego Con actually is in regards to the Blair Witch Project and its 25th anniversary. And it appears that they're going to re-release it on Blu-ray in its most accurate form that they wanted when they first released it. So I guess some of the footage that ended up under deleted scenes will be reincorporated, and they're going to do a remaster on it. So I'm kind of anxious to see what happens with that.
Well, first of all, how has it been 25 years? And secondly, I saw that at the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival, And so I, you talk about going in cold. I was like dead cold. I hadn't been a peep about it, and I ended up having mad love for that movie. My wife, on the other hand, can't stand it. She thinks it's absolute garbage, which I was funny because I figured she'd be perfect for this, or it would be perfect for her, but not the case. So I saw it and got a chance to review it for the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel, and I was thrilled with it.
Now, when you saw it, this was the actual version that Lionsgate released, not the one that showed up to Sundance initially, right?
Correct.
Gotcha. Because I know when they showed it at Sundance, it wasn't in its final form,
Yep.
if you will. They were just trying to get it sold. And I know once it was sold, then they went ahead and made a lot of alterations in the editing and whatnot. Namely, because it was very similar to another movie that was being shopped around entitled The Last Broadcast.
Right.
And both were very documentary laden, if you will.
Yep.
So that's why a lot of the footage that was cut from Blair Witch ended up in the TV special that ended up on Sci-Fi Channel,
Right.
which I actually showed Niobe recently. And it does have some interesting footage in there, but I remember seeing the initial advertising for Blair Witch, and like most people, and I know youngins today, Padawans today, are like, well, how can you take it seriously? The idea of some kids getting going missing and their footage being found, that doesn't happen. It's like, well, you got to remember the internet was non-existent at that time,
Right.
so it was very easy to create an ad campaign like that and make people believe that this was actual footage shot by the people who had disappeared.
Yep. No, I agree. This and that's why I'm hoping that this is a good idea, because it's not the same world that it was 25 years ago.
So a lot of that footage actually ended up in a Sci-Fi Channel documentary that they created to promote the movie called Curse of the Blair Witch.
Right. Yep. And I remember seeing it, and I thought it was pretty cool. The special. But that's again when sci-fi used to do fun stuff.
Yeah. I know when we went to see it, I was managing a video store at the time. So there was like 7 of us that decided to go, and the crowd was huge for it. Like we actually had to buy tickets for a later showing because they had been sold out. And we're
Wow.
talking the entire theater was showing Blair Witch Project. And you could just feel it in the air. And of course, you could argue, well, a good portion of the audience thought this was actually real footage, but you could feel the tension in the audience, and you could feel
Yeah.
the expectation of horror or something about to happen.
Right.
And again, you can make the argument that, well, nothing ever really does happen, which I really hate, when people come at the film like that. And the whole movie just worked in that fashion. And when it was over, our audience completely disheveled. Everyone was just quiet. They didn't know what to do. People slowly shuffled out of the theater. And what I saw was something that never happens anymore. You had groups of people discussing the movie after,
Right.
something that just doesn't occur any longer for the
Right.
most part. And everyone was throwing out, what did you think of the ending? What did the ending mean? Somebody would bring it up. Well, remember what they said about what would happen. The children would be placed in the corner.
And it's funny because a lot of, and I don't mean funny in a, I'm not cutting them down, but it's amazing to me how many people didn't get that in the very second that it was happening. Um, but that's okay, because that stinger, them getting it even as they're walking to their car, that must have been beautiful too. That must have been very cool, you know? I mean, that's something that you remember when you got the ending, whether it was at the moment that it happened or when you got home, because at some point you're going to make that connection, and it's like, holy shit. So I loved it. And I know our producer saw this movie, and I'm sure has some things to say about it. Don't you?
Yes, I also saw it in theaters. And if you read my column, then you'll know exactly how I saw it. Technically, I was alone. And the crazy thing is that we must have gone much later, not at the very first release dates,
Right.
because when I had gone with my cousin CJ, there were a lot of open seats. And I had already seen some hubbub about this movie on the internet. So I was still under the impression that this was a based on a true story
Right.
type of situation, that it wasn't make believe basically.
Right.
And yeah, when you talk about making the connection about the ending or just the story that they had in there, I actually had that in the theater immediately. So recounting the stories, recounting what had happened, and then actually seeing it play out in front of me, I was like, "Oh, oh." So
Yeah.
I made that connection right then and there.
Yeah.
Now,
Because I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I will say though, I didn't discuss it with anybody. I didn't have anybody to talk about it with.
Right.
Even though I went with my cousin and his buddy, we still didn't discuss it. It was just more like, okay, here's this scary movie that we went to, and then that was the end of it.
Wow. Yeah. See, I don't think it's possible for Rick and I to go to a movie and not discuss it afterwards. And something like Blair Witch, we would still be discussing it from the initial viewing. We'd still be sitting in a car someplace talking about it because that's what we do. But yeah, it's you had a very odd situation, and by the way, on Horror Curiosa, which is your page on our website, people can read that story because it really is bizarre how you went. I mean, it's I had a different experience. Rick had a different experience, but you certainly had a different experience at that movie. You
Absolutely.
went with people and you saw it alone. So,
It's okay.
yeah.
I've since forgiven the situation, but
Oh, so
came to terms.
you don't hold a grudge as long as I do then.
Nope,
So
nope.
though you weren't sitting next to CJ, did do you remember anything about how people responded in the theater to it?
Like I said, since we were practically some of the only people in there, I didn't see people ahead of me, so they must have been behind us.
Right.
It was really quiet. There wasn't anybody, talking loudly, being disrespectful during the movie. None of that. Like I said, it was like I was alone. So I could see to the right of me that my cousin was there 5 seats in, and then his friend Toya was like on the other end
Right.
of the theater. So,
Right.
really there wasn't any like personal. I had a really big personal space bubble.
Okay, because I clearly remember seeing a few people in the audience out of the tons of people that were in there, but a few people actually looked like if you touched them, they would shatter. I mean, they were that pent up, and it was wonderful to see. I mean, as a horror fan, you get off on that. You're hoping that everybody's having this great experience, and they certainly were, but man, were they tense. I don't know, Rick, if you ran into that.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, you could feel everything the audience was going through, and from the opening moments, well, earlier in the film, when they decide, okay, we're packing up and we're about to leave the vehicle, and you have that final shot of the car just
Yep.
sitting there, the audience was already sensing dread and
Yep.
foreboding. You heard people go, "Oh," there was just something about that final image. Which again, if we go back to the making of the film, the actual camera operators was the cast. So it's very interesting to think that it's not like they set out to do that shot.
Right.
Basically, the director probably said, well, if you could swing around and get the vehicle. But it's not like the directors are thinking, oh, well, the camera angle is just going to add to the mood and the
Right.
ambiance. But there's something about it that does add to it all,
Oh,
which I find
absolutely.
very interesting. And the audience picked up on that. And they were like, oh, yeah, that. And again, it works with the marketing, the fact that we know these kids have disappeared. So, of course, that is the final shot. That's the final time they're going to see that vehicle. And the audience picked up on that. They picked up on the humor in certain points.
Yeah.
When Mike breaks down and
Right.
everyone laughed out of the insanity of it because they felt like the characters at that point. And they were in it. They were well invested in the film and its characters,
Yes.
which is very odd to me because when you hear people talk of the film now, it's usually in a very negative light. And I wonder how many people saw it on video and how many actually had the theatrical experience, and
So,
how much of that affects their final opinion of the film.
well, neither you or I would know this because we didn't have the experience, but I wonder how much of it is the kind of William Castle syndrome that today we think of William Castle and we kind of smile at the movies because the movies are fun movies. But I wonder if they were less fun then because of the seats were doing this or this was flying over the audience or
Mhm.
this gimmick or that gimmick. I wonder if that added some dread to it. So I wonder if he hasn't his opinions of his movies hasn't lightened over the years to, gee, yeah, that's William Castle, so we're going to have some fun, instead of it's William Castle, we're probably going to get the shit scared out of us. And
I
I'm
think
wondering if it's the same kind of thing, maybe.
maybe, but what I find odd about the relationship with Blair Witch's legacy, if you will, with modern audiences, is you think, and this ties into my column for the month about elevated horror, you think that type of audience today would look back at Blair Witch fondly or take it in a different manner than they do now, where you'll hear many people refer to that film and say, well, nothing happens in it,
Yeah.
or it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just a bunch of people talking for a long period of time. But to me, it feels like it would fall into that genre for younger film viewers.
Right. Yeah, it's I usually come back when somebody says nothing happens, I say everything happens in that.
It's
Everything.
very
That's
subtle.
it is a that I've seen very few movies that have so much to do with the way it ends. I mean, every minute has so much to do with it, the way it ends. Um, it's not something that's out of the blue. I mean, if you're not paying attention, you might miss it, but it's not because it wasn't on the screen. It's because you weren't paying attention. But
Yep.
no, I mean, when that movie came out, it was when they were running through the woods and the camera was all over the place. There was a sense of panic in the audience. It was much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre in that it Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to me, the magic of that movie is the fact that it looks like you're watching it through the eyes of one of the family members that you never get to meet. But Daniel Pearl's camera work um, uh, in there is just appears to me to be as insane as the characters in the movie. So, and of course in the movie, in the Blair Witch Project, the cast members are the camera men and women. So that's why you get that insane quality. I love that. Um, when you're looking at this beautifully constructed, smooth shot, you're not usually that afraid. But when the camera's moving like an insane person is running with it, you're like, oh shit, okay, what are we gonna see? Again, my opinion.
No, I agree. And if we're looking at the film technology-wise for its time and everything. The constraints that they made the film under were due to budget. They're like, okay, well, we can't afford to shoot it as a normal narrative, but we can go ahead, we can use a video camera and a 16 millimeter Bolex, and we can go out and make this movie. And the best way to do it is in the confines of, well, they're a documentary crew, and this is what they're doing.
Yep.
And it's a motif that essentially started a genre, found footage, though we have films in the past that definitely had elements like that. Cannibal
Sure.
Holocaust, Peeping Tom. But this was the
Absolutely.
first time it was brought to on a larger scale to film goers.
Right.
And what
I
I
agree.
find really unique, one of the arguments about found footage that people usually use to shit on the genre is what? Why are they recording?
Right.
But really, Blair Witch, in my opinion, finds the greatest reason, and it's to deal with the nightmare that they're in. They even address, why are you still recording? And it
Yep.
pisses Josh off to a point. And it's really Heather trying to keep herself together by continuing to make the documentary.
Right.
Mike's just
Absolutely.
wanting to get home. He's not really helping out. And Josh just finally loses it with her. And that's what it is. She needs to keep herself together, and that's what she's doing. Where other found footage movies never have an excuse.
Right.
Even ones I like. I love Cloverfield, but there's not really an explanation of why TJ Miller keeps recording.
Right.
Like maybe if they had done a more detailed scene to say, well, someone needs to document this. This is important. It's like a few days ago when we were talking about Diary of the Dead. It's a found footage film, but it's done under ridiculous means in terms of there's music added, and they make it a point to say, oh, by the way, we've added score to intensify the situation, whatever she says. And it's kind of like, it's a documentary about the dead coming back. I don't think you need to do any editing or add music for the viewers to understand the severity of the situation.
And I've said it to you in the past as the I can't remember her name, but as she's taking the RV away from the mansion, you've got in there you've got the Yellow Rose of Texas playing. I mean, you actually hear on the music that they supposedly put in there to add tension. And it's like, what? Are you shitting me? Why the fuck would you put that in there? So Diary of the Dead is a found footage movie that I wish they hadn't found.
Right. But it's an example of how I think Blair Witch started a subgenre and then actually got accused for its weakest points, its weakest motifs. When you go back and you look at the film, they actually explain in great detail every motif that other films abused, essentially.
Right. Yep. I completely agree.
And then the home video release was just as huge. I was actually working at a video store at the time, and I was joking about this actually not too long ago with some friends. I hated my job because part of our duties for movies that came out in bulk was that you had to sit there, take a tape out, prep it for rental, put a little plastic sleeve over the cover, and then you'd put it on the wall. But it was kind of cool to do an entire wall of Blair Witch Project VHS tapes.
Right.
So you would walk back and there's like 500 tapes of that movie. And ultimately they got turned into preview titles. So we had to take them all down and take them all back out of the box again. But it was a unique moment to see this movie that we had seen in theaters be such a revolutionary flick that they were going to be selling it at home for $19.95, to home video.
Yeah.
And just to see it everywhere was really wild, especially for a horror fan, because our movies don't usually hit that kind of cultural relevance.
Exactly.
With what's been referred to now as normies, people who don't usually watch horror films.
Yeah.
They saw the ad in the paper or they saw a report on the news. So to see that happen was pretty amazing.
And when the DVD came out, if I remember correctly, it was $9.99, which is even better. It was like, holy shit, I get up in quality for $10. That works for me. Yeah, then, I bought it immediately.
Oh yeah, I was excited about that just for the commentary because I still wanted to know how the movie was made. Yep. And again, a movie that for all intensive purposes probably shouldn't have worked. They didn't even have a full script. They really didn't. They had index cards. They had ideas of, okay, you are going to do this today. You're going to open your tent and this is going to happen. There was no real story. A lot of the story got crafted while they were making the movie.
Right. Which is a great way to go about it anyway. It's just probably not the best way. But I mean, you wake up in the morning and see what kind of day it is, and you kind of think, okay, you know what? It rained. We could do something with that.
We can work it into the story somehow.
Yeah, we can have some fun with that. So yeah, absolutely.
So favorite character moments or characters in general. Is there one of the three kids that stood out the most? Or you just kind of love them all? Is there any key point that sticks out?
I kind of love them all, but Josh to me felt like a little bit more of a victim, and I don't mean that in a cruel way. I just mean that he seemed to be the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've always liked that character the most. But I love them all. I think they're all great characters.
I love Josh because I think he's probably most representative of me if I was in that situation.
Right.
Because unfortunately I get very aggressive anyhow. And I would be like, cut the bullshit, stop filming, we're fucking lost here.
Right.
Excuse me. And one of the best scenes out of the movie to me is really when the drama hits its peak, when Josh takes the camera and just starts laying into Heather.
Yeah,
because that's really what it's about. He's kind of like, fuck you, we're freaking out, you need to freak out too. Yeah, and he just keeps just slamming her with it, and just her reaction when she finally breaks down is pretty brilliant, I think.
Yeah,
again, for three actors who had never really acted before, who weren't actors by trade.
Yeah.
I thought they brought out wonderful performances.
Yeah, they're stellar.
Because
I mean,
they
all three of them.
Genuine.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes. So what does the new Blu-ray offer that we don't know?
Apparently the way it's gonna work is that it's gonna be entirely remastered, and they're going to reincorporate sequences that never made it into the final cut of the film. Now, the one thing that does kind of concern me, it says additional effects. So I'm hoping they're not going to tweak it or do something odd to it.
Right.
Hopefully it's going to be the same film, just with a little more oomph, if you will. So
Well,
we'll have to see how that works.
Shot first.
Yeah, exactly.
They're referring to it as the complete cut of the movie.
Wow.
So we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah, we don't want the walkie-talkies taken out of the FBI agent's hands.
Oh my God.
Like in Eat Me. I mean E.T.
What I'm kind of hoping for is that there'll be current commentary, because I'm very interested in knowing what the filmmakers think and the cast looking back at everything.
Yes.
I'm really interested in what they have to say about its legacy. Things of that nature would be very interesting.
I know.
A retrospective.
Exactly.
Yeah, because now it's got some time. People have, but again, they look at it like it was a jokey thing, a gimmick, and it's like you have no clue what these people went through. I mean, the internet stuff back when there was barely an internet, and the wanted posters and shit like that. I mean, it was brilliant.
The ad campaign was very new and fresh, and it's all of a sudden available to the masses. You make a narrative that speaks to the story you're trying to tell. Yep. They wanted us to believe that these kids were gone and missing, and here are these tapes that could possibly show what happened to them.
Yep.
So when you're in the theater or when you see it for the first time, and that's the preface that you have, it does something to you.
I think so too. It hit me years after that. I don't think I ever saw a trailer for it. And why? Well, a trailer is part of an unveiling of a movie. This wasn't a movie. This was a thing that happened. This was an event that happened. This is footage. You know, you don't make a trailer for found footage. You know, so I love that fact. Yet tonight, I will be putting the DVD in or the Blu-ray in, because I don't think I want to know if there's even a trailer on it. But if there is, I want to see it, because I've never seen a trailer 25 years.
Even the film's marketing is something you couldn't get away with any longer. You could not go out there and simply say, "Oh, here's a movie. Joe Flo goes to Idaho." Just the poster. No previews, no trailers, maybe just a quote from someone who's seen it. Your movie would bomb. People would be like, I'm not going to waste my time on that. Because unfortunately, we have been turned into a culture where the movie trailer, something Callie and I were talking about recently, has to show you everything.
Yes.
I mean, every damn thing.
Yep. Absolutely.
I've seen trailers where they will show you the final moment of the movie.
Yep.
It's horrible.
What was the remake of When a Stranger Calls? I'm almost positive gives away the big line from the movie, and it's like, holy shit, really? That was a decision that somebody greenlit? You know, it's ridiculous to me. But you're
Terminator
right.
Salvation, same thing. Not that it would have made the movie any better, but the twist of him being a Terminator would have been kind of nice to be revealed in the theater, as opposed to the trailer, which meant halfway through they tell you he's a Terminator, and it's like, okay, well, good job, you blew it.
Well, that's that. No, I know, and it's frustrating. But we also talked about a box art that recently gave away the ending. And it's by a company who is better than that. It's by Scream Factory. Gives away the last shot, or the last important shot, of Trilogy of Terror from the box art that they just did. And I sat there looking at it in shock, saying they really didn't think this through. But you know what? I mean, I want to say they don't care, but Scream Factory is better than that.
I don't think it's lack of caring. I think you have a lot of people who work on projects that, one, they have no connection to the material in terms of maybe they've never seen it before, or they weren't there when it happened. So to them, there's no, it's not a big deal, merely inconvenience to go ahead and say, well, what's the big deal if we're showing you one of the final moments on the poster? Is it that big of a deal? And it's like, yeah, it's a huge deal.
Yeah. And the other thing that I get upset with when they say, well, okay, but it's iconic. Yeah. Okay. But if, let's say, we wanted kind of an iconic shot from the movie without tipping the ending, you could have done one with her and the doll. There are plenty of scenes that she's got the doll and it looks menacing as hell, and they could have gone in that direction. But anyway, getting back to Blair Witch, I'm so guarded about that ending because of the, well, nothing really happens kind of thing, that it really pisses me off when that happens.
I remember having a discussion with someone from the video store, like the next day. We talked about the movie for a few days, and they were upset that you didn't see the Blair Witch. And we threw out, because we were creatives, we threw out some ideas, and it's like, well, what if during Heather's confession to the camera, there's this almost pre-staged bit of blackness to the left of her? What if at the very last moment they had spent some money and they had gotten a great special effects person to realize what the Blair Witch would look like, and something just came out? Yeah, the audience would have screamed. There would have been horror throughout the audience at that moment. But for how long? And would you still be talking about the movie as you walked out?
Of course not.
I don't think you would have.
Of course not.
That moment in the basement just it paints pictures for you on what's happening to poor Heather and what's ultimately going to happen to poor Mike.
Right. And
And you
I'm
keep
sorry.
filling in blanks. Like, was it a witch? Was it someone else? There's so many aspects of what it could have been. Like, just the idea of it being some fuck in the woods who just decided they're gonna hurt these kids.
Yeah.
That's even more terrifying than a supernatural aspect.
Right.
But then you
And
could also look at it, what if it's just a convergence of every bad thing that could be human, supernatural, and they just all come together in a perfect storm, and it's unfortunately unleashed on these three innocent kids.
right. And let's take a great constructed monster. Let's take the alien from Alien. Okay.
Mhm.
Great looking monster. You're still going to find people who thought that it looked cheesy or didn't like it or it wasn't scary to them
It looks so
because
fake.
right. So although that wasn't my experience, I mean I thought it was freaking brilliant. But you're still going to find people like that. Well, can you imagine if it had happened with Blair Witch? I mean, the same damn thing would have happened. They would have gone, "Oh, wow, nothing happens." They would have said the same damn thing, that nothing happens, because at the end they carted out something that looked like, the Wicked Witch of the West. And you and I might sit there and say, "Well, no, that's not what it looked like at all. It was scary as fuck." They still wouldn't they wouldn't have agreed with us. Well, I think it was better not to show us. I think it was better. I thought they came up with the perfect ending, which was to show
Yes.
Mike against the wall in the corner. I was like, "Holy shit, man." You know,
See,
What
and,
is going to be the most scary to somebody that might not be scary to somebody else? Our own imagination.
right.
That's all you have to do. As
Yep.
long as the people can dream it up themselves, that's why I felt as terrified as I did. And I didn't watch the movie the way you guys probably did. I watch it through my hands, and I had my hoodie with me because it was probably cold. So I was going like this, and I can barely see past my hands. I look towards the corners of the screen rather than directly at the screen. I do lots of different things to
Yep.
change that because as much as I'm not a horror fan, I still would like to see whatever it is that I could see
Right.
without distressing myself too much. And if you do that, if you come out with something that I could recognize as something, it's, oh, okay, if that's what it looks like. If I don't find that terrifying, you've already dispelled the magic for me at that point.
Exactly.
So just making you use your imagination. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to paint a picture like Rick and I were sitting back like during this, like with our feet up on the thing and just chilling. I certainly can guarantee you I wasn't. I don't think my back was against the seat back during the entire movie. I was sitting up. I mean, I was like, I was waiting to be launched into the air. And and I'm assuming that Rick was in the same basic, was feeling the same, that kind of crazed aspect to the movie.
well, you get those wonderful shivers that you
Yeah,
don't get a lot in movies anymore. And
right.
sometimes it'll still happen to me watching something on the projector. And it's just a great feeling. When you love these type of films, that is our roller coaster moment, to have that kind of feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, it's ridiculous to think we don't enjoy being scared because we're horror fans. It's just the opposite. We're hoping to hell. I mean, if I finally, whenever the hell my heart decides to stop, if it's in a movie, watching a horror movie, I'm happy. I'm good. That's what I want every horror movie to do for me. I don't want to come out of a horror movie going, yeah, all right, whatever.
It's one of the reasons I get upset when people talk so badly about some of the James Wan directed supernatural movies, being Insidious, The Conjuring. They'll be like, "Oh, it's a jump scare." It's like, no, if it's a well-crafted scare and I get that shiver, they've done their job. And there's quite a few moments in those movies, for example, they do their job. It works. Even if
Yes.
it was meant just to be a movie I saw recently that I'm still boggled that people are enjoying, Long Legs. People keep talking about, oh, I jumped. When did you jump in that movie? Please explain that to me. And it's not, again, it's not meant to criticize their film going habits. It's just explain it to me. Explain how that was terrifying to you, because I didn't
Right.
get it.
Because there's two scenes in Insidious that I almost swallowed my own tongue. I mean, it was that scary. Because it comes out of nowhere, but it's not really a jump scare in the classic sense. It's just put in there, but you notice it.
Yes.
That's the jump scare, is that it's just in there. And all of a sudden you're like, what? You know, you can't believe that it was in there. And that's when, you know, thank God for home video. That's when I hit rewind, or reverse, and watch it about 43 times to see how they schnookered me.
See, and
But
those are great moments. I love those
they
moments.
are. I want that to happen all the time.
And even if it's, you could argue that it's cliched or a motif, whatever, but it always works for me. The you know, the patented sort of shot of a wide shot with a person walking through, and if there's just that shadow in the background,
Yep.
a figure just standing there, it with no music, it will get me every freaking time. I'll be like, "Oof," and I get that shiver, and I love it.
Or the fact that the father and the sentinel never has anything to do with it, initially has nothing to do with the other character in the room.
Mhm.
It just walks by. That damn near stopped my heart. I mean, you know,
And then you're just like, "Why? Why did you do that?" Oh, that's
right.
right, because you're
Yeah.
you're a master craftsman. That's
Yeah,
why you did it.
stop fucking with me, you know. But the truth is we want that all the time. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's funny how in line to see these movies, you will hear people say, "Gee, I hope it isn't too scary." But you'll never, in a comedy, you'll never see somebody say, "Gee, I hope it's not too funny."
Eddie Murphy's gonna make me pee my pants. Please don't be too funny this
Yeah,
time, though.
I hope it's not that funny, or I hope there's not. Oh, John Wick. Gee, I hope this one doesn't have quite as much action as the other ones. You know, it's like, what a stupid fucking thing to say. Of course, I want it to be scary. I want it to hurt me. It's so scary.
I find it very interesting that one of the things that the directors, Eduardo Sanchez and Dan Myrick, spoke about when they were coming up with the idea for this and coming up with their title, they were like, "We really want something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre." So you see that with the title, The Blair Witch Project.
Yep.
But also the other comment they made was that hopefully it'll be something people watch down the line, that
Yeah.
people will be watching in college at night, things of that nature, having parties to watch this movie. And I think we will get to that point. I think people still do watch it with a level of respect that it deserves.
Yes.
And what's very interesting is, though, the films have a lot in common. And the biggest thing is that you're never at ease. And I think that's where filmmakers have gone wrong. We've been too trusting with the audience.
Yeah.
Like, we make them feel good. Like, oh, you know, nothing's bad is going to happen to you while you're here. You're okay. You're in a safe place. It's fine.
Right.
We'll scare you just a little bit. Where if you look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Toby's all, fuck you. You're gonna go through it. Whatever I show you is what I'm gonna show you. And
Right.
there's no way out. You don't have a choice. Kind of like you said, it's like this is filmed by another part of the family and we just never see them. And Blair Witch feels like that. There's never a moment where you're like, they're gonna get out of this. It's gonna be okay.
Right.
You know, and the filmmakers knew what they were doing, even to know they weren't the ones running the camera. They were puppeteering everything.
Absolutely. And you know, there's another movie that Callie picked up on also, that has that kind of stuff that we're talking about, which is Signs, because the two times that you see the payoff are not direct shots. One of them is very fleeting, and the other one is in the reflection of a television screen that the TV's off.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it works. I mean, in both cases, in fact, I'm getting goosebumps now. It works because they don't let you see, they don't let you see the payoff. And and I love that about it too. You don't have to directly scare me. Just make me afraid to be in the room. And I'm good.
Yep.
I'm perfectly happy.
It was one of the things that Carpenter sort of knew on the original Halloween is that they didn't need to show Michael Myers all the time
Right.
to be terrifying. Most of the built up tension was from the characters.
Yep.
Sam is constantly there. It's like he's on his way. You've got to be ready. This is what's going to happen. And then we see enough of him finally to go, yes, this is a menace. This is something that can't be stopped.
Right. And if you as an audience member are uncomfortable now, it's because you didn't listen to Sam. Because you should have been listening to Sam, because he lays the whole damn thing out for you. So, I love that aspect of it too.
How different of a movie would it have been if Brackett was like, "Oh, okay, this is serious. All right, we're going to corner off the town. We're going to call the state police." Myers would
Exactly.
pull up and go, "Damn, there's like more cops than I expected. I guess I'm try next year. We'll come back."
Yep. Yeah.
So you can't talk about Blair Witch without talking about two unfortunate incidents. The first, obviously, being Blair Witch: Book of Shadows, Blair Witch
Yep.
2, which
Horrible
on paper,
to me.
though, it should have worked because you have Joe Berlinger, one of the greatest documentary filmmakers in history. His work on Paradise Lost, which actually saved three kids and got them out of prison. The fact that he has got such a great visual flair
Yep.
and what he wanted to do with it, making it both a meta film and a narrative, seemed like the way to go. But very much like big studios, by this time, Artisan had become a much larger studio, and they were like, no, we need this to compete with not only the other found footage movies that have come out in the interim, but we need this to make millions of dollars. So it has to feel like a real horror movie. There's not enough real narrative in there, so we need you to go reshoot this, and this. We need some gore here. And before you know it, you just have this weird hodgepodge of a movie that has a few good moments, but overall is completely just unsatisfying.
Yeah, the movie that they released, the finished product, is damn near to me unwatchable, and it's an insult to the first one. And I know that you can disregard the second one, but to me, okay, you can make a bad movie, but don't insult the first one. And
Mhm.
this to me did. I was just ticked.
I know sitting in the theater, I was like the first maybe 5 minutes of the movie, kind of the prelude, if you will, before the opening titles. It was working. I was like, okay, you got Kurt Loder from MTV talking about the Blair Witch Project. It was very interesting to see how it mirrored reality because you did have people going to Maryland trying to find the shooting locations. People still under the opinion that it was real when, of course, by this time we knew it wasn't. But you still had people making that trek.
Right.
You had the people in Burkittsville, Maryland, sort of upset that it was besieged by people who were fans of the movie. Um, and that was working. But then after the credits rolled, it just again the mental hospital sequences, everything. It had lost the feel of the original film. And
Yeah, it
you can
really did.
argue, well, how are you going to make anyone happy with the sequel? Well, the original filmmakers, they had a great idea for a sequel. It was a prequel. It was going to be a period piece talking about Ellie, talking about all the mythology that they had crafted in the original film. You would see these elements.
Right.
Uh, and I think that would have been a better film. It would have been a straight narrative, obviously. But I think
Yeah.
that would have been a better way to go, and at least it wouldn't insult the events of the original film.
Right. Yep. And of course the other is I'm sorry, the other thing you were going to bring up, which was the other horrible thing that we have to talk about,
would be simply Blair Witch
Blair Witch.
from Adam Wingard, and unfortunately by a screenwriter I adore, Simon Barrett, who really is, in my opinion, he is the reason Adam Wingard has a career. Because I think if Wingard was left to his own devices, he would never write a script as good as You're Next. He would never write a script as good as The Guest. Barrett is just a talented freaking screenwriter, and he's actually directed a movie now. So I'm hoping he kind of goes off and does his own thing.
I would agree with that he's extremely talented.
And the problem with the Blair Witch reboot, whatever you want to call it, is that, again, it doesn't understand what made that first film good.
Yeah.
It really fails to do that. First of all, and my then 12-year-old daughter brought this up. She brought up the fact that visually, it's not the same sort of movie. Even to know they're selling you on the idea of a drone, and they're selling you an idea on these earpiece cameras, like something out of Aliens, but it's still not actually shot on video.
Right.
You're using current technology. It's not the same as a 35 millimeter camera, but you're using the digital video, which is to mimic film, not video. So you can do the camera angles all day long, but it's not video.
Right.
So you lose a lot of the heart there. And then the biggest thing is there's no explanation of why everyone's recording or why anyone continues to record.
Yeah. I agree also.
The characters were unlikable. The fact that they try to go back to the well and they say that that's Heather, but obviously that's not Heather we see in the mirror
and
in the house.
And I didn't give a shit about anybody. I mean anybody. You know, you would have thought they couldn't have done that 100%, but they managed to do that 100%. I didn't give a fuck about any of those people.
And I hate to tell you, but when you use a drone, you've dated your movie.
Yeah.
You
absolutely.
really have. There's just no reason to do it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it wasn't even used in a clever way.
Yeah.
It's as if the only reason that existed was to have the piece of her trying to climb the tree to get at it and then falls and injures herself.
Yep.
It was the only reason, was to have that set piece.
I can't think of another. Yeah. So that's what it was.
I think ultimately the ending of it doesn't hit with the same impact as the original Blair Witch. It introduces some elements of time travel, which are, fine. I didn't mind that. To a point, it was trying to explain why the original trio in the first film, why it feels like they're at the same place all the time, going in circles. And I'm like, okay, it's an interesting thing to add into it. But ultimately, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't even work within the lore of the first film. And I was really hyped for that movie because
I wasn't.
I was initially because of the marketing, because I thought it was cool that they shot it under a different title. And then at San Diego Con was like, hey, guess what, guys? You got a new Blair Witch movie. To not know about it, at least I was intrigued, because we're in an industry where someone farts and you're going to know about it. So
Right.
To go and make a reboot, sequel, whatever you want to refer to it as, to one of the greatest horror cult films of all time, to get away with it without anyone knowing is pretty outstanding. So I was really hoping, and not for nothing, with Simon Barrett writing, I'm like, okay, there's got to be something there. And it's definitely his weakest work as a writer.
Boy, I mean, by a long shot.
Yeah. And now Blair Witch is in this weird kind of place where, what's happening with it. There's still discussion of it, doing another film possibly. Now we have this complete film of the complete version of the film coming out. So that'll be interesting.
I'll watch it. I'm curious, but I don't know. I think I'm jaded to a point where you're going to have to prove to me that this is going to add something to it, because I think that the thing that a lot of people who love the original will agree with, and they really knocked it out of the park. I don't want to call it a perfect film, but they got everything right in that movie. and I don't. That happens so seldom that we were very lucky to experience it when it was a thing.
Oh, absolutely. Because I feel that the same things that came into play, and I want to do this on Film Fury sometimes. I want to do episodes just called happenstance, meaning just certain things just had to happen. It wasn't planned. If you look at Halloween, if John Carpenter got everything he wanted on Halloween, that movie would be so different. If Spielberg had that shark working all the time in Jaws, it would be so different. And for so much improvisation on Blair Witch to work, and then during the process of making the movie, if they heard someone say something like, "Ooh, that's good," we need to work that in to everything, because those townspeople were basically just told, well, can you just make something up that sounds creepy, and this is our basic mythology, just go ahead and say something.
Yep.
And what they said worked so well, everything from that little kid not wanting her mom to continue to talk about the Blair Witch, when really it's just a cranky little girl. But what does it come off as? It comes off as a little girl who, even the mention of Blair Witch, she just doesn't want to
Is
hear it out of her
afraid.
mother's mouth,
Yep.
I mean, those are things you can't plan that necessarily.
Right.
So
No.
for all that to come together that way, movie gods, if you will, stepped in to say, this is all
The
going to work.
stars aligned.
It
Yeah,
shouldn't
it's
work,
true.
but this is all going to work. And
Absolutely.
And what a great feeling that must have been for them to start cutting it together, going, holy shit, guys, this
is working. This is working. Absolutely.
But then again, though, what if they had not had last broadcast to worry about and decided to keep all that documentary footage in, and it feeling like more of a documentary instead of what we got, which was just here's all the footage they shot, and now you're going to watch it. Because I don't think if they had done it on the lines of the last broadcast, I don't think it would be as good of a film.
Right.
The documentary portion would throw you out of it. It would pull you out of the emotion and the fear and everything else.
Like,
because who wants to see that? Who wants to see that camera tip over at the end, and then some professor going, "Well, I think what simply happened was, it's like, no, it wouldn't have worked."
Right.
Because when you watch the last broadcast, I kind of feel that's the point that the movie fails, is that it's so much of a documentary, and then it tries to, in the final moments, become a narrative storytelling method, and it just doesn't work very well. And somehow the Blair Witch people were like, well, if we do it this way, it's going to feel just like this other movie that's out there. But by cutting it, it made it a better film.
Boy, it really did. We, again, I know I've said it before, but we were very lucky that we got that movie at the time we got that movie, and we experienced that movie at the time we were able to, before it became something other.
Right.
So anyway, this was fun.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do this again. I mean, this kind of,
freestyle.
Yeah.
The freestyling. Yeah, I think it works. Especially if it's a topic that's sort of current, and they had just made this announcement on Blair Witch into its complete form. So,
all right. So
let's make it very well.
Let's make a promise to keep doing it then.
All right. So that means next week we can talk about Garbage Pail Kids, the movie, finally, right?
No, not yet. Oh Lord. What have I gotten myself into?
Something fun.
Any last words, moderator, puppeteer up there?
I did want to ask, so since we got to see it the way that we saw it, what happens when we showed it to Niobe, who was 12 at the time? Mm-hmm. She saw it on TV. It's not like she had the theater going experience. Why do you think it impacted her differently?
It's a very good question. And all I can think of is that as far as films go, she hasn't been tainted, if you will, terribly. Like, incredibly enough, if you really measure the amount of movies she's seen, I don't think she's seen enough to take her out of it. There's something about, and maybe it's because in her particular generation, they're obsessed with older technology. Like, for example, when Guardians of the Galaxy came out, kids her age were suddenly wanting a Walkman. They were using technology that was backwards.
Yeah.
So I think with found footage, there's something that's tangible. You can hold it. It's not out in the ether. So I guess you could picture them using the cameras and everything, maybe, or you actually see them use the cameras in the movie, and it's a nostalgia for something she can't have nostalgia for, if that makes sense. And I think it just somehow it just clicks with her, and by extension, she stays with the characters. She never walked away. She never looked down at her tablet. She was in that movie.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and she loved it.
That's very cool.
To the
Okay.
point where she was talking about making her own found footage movie. So
Good for her.
Yes. Yep. That was my only throw in.
Okay, cool.
all right, well, go ahead and please go over to the website and look at my new column about elevated horror.
And look at my column about stupidly buying a book. You'll love this.
Thanks so much for joining us, Rich. We appreciate you always.
Always a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you. And what else do you have to say, baby?
Well, I was really thinking about it. Blair Witch is very similar to a bird.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And